This is The Other 51. I'm Brian, and this week I'm speaking with Tony-nominated songwriter and composer Joe Iconis. You've got some beautiful scenery behind you as we record this. I'm in my little corner of a very hot upstairs, but you look like you got some nice weather to enjoy quarantine with.
I do. I live in the city. I live in Hell's Kitchen, New York City. And my wife and I have been in our apartment since the top of quarantine, but this weekend we came to my parents' house on suburban Long Island. So I'm in a backyard right now, which is so strange for me. It's such a novelty to be in a backyard.
So what's New York City been like? I talked to a friend of mine for the podcast right when quarantine was starting, like back in March. And so what's it been like? What's the city been like these past 2 months?
It's been so strange, man. It's been just completely bizarre. You know, I'm a lifelong New Yorker, from Long Island originally, and then I've lived in the city since I was 18. And it's just been like I've just never seen anything like it. You know, people keep referring to it as like apocalyptic, and it's very zombie movie like, and it just is like, it's so strange to be in these areas, you know. And like I said, I live in Hell's Kitchen, which is in Midtown. These areas that are so densely populated normally are so like exploding with life, to just be empty. It's just been the strangest thing. And really, you know, to be honest, like kind of a bummer. Like it's been really depressing to sort of be in the city. And I, as soon as the quarantine started, I was just like, I just don't want to leave my apartment. And I would go days on end without leaving my apartment, which just seems like something that I could never even imagine before,
Right.
Just because it was such a bummer to sort of be out in the city. But I will say that like the last like week or so, I've felt it kind of like not spring back to life, but I've felt New Yorkers kind of like figure out how to negotiate this current situation. It's more that, right? Where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, we can still like have our own, have our energy and like still like, go about our lives in, a drastically different way, but we could still like, move forward. So I've been like feeling that a little bit.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't familiar with New York City and Hell's Kitchen, that's the theater district, and not far from Times Square, and right kind of in the heart. Like you think of New York City bustle, that's the area you think of. Is there an area? Obviously, Times Square would spring to mind, but is there kind of something quintessentially New York that you've noticed missing or hasn't been there, that's like really stood out to you as like this is when it got real, that this wasn't happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, like truly, it's sort of the same thing, but just Broadway shutting down has been the thing. And it's like, I mean, and like, Broadway shutting down is like the more of an idea, but just literally seeing theaters, like seeing 44th Street, which is one of the streets that has theaters on both sides, seeing it not lit up is just like, oh, I've like literally never seen that before. And I've been coming to into the city regularly since I was 6 years old. That has just it's been really mind blowing. It's like there's the Cameron Crowe movie Vanilla Sky, and like the top of that movie, it's like Tom Cruise is having a dream, and he's in a deserted Times Square. And I remember when that movie came out, it was like such a thing that it's like they shut down Times Square so that they could film this scene. It's so insane to see Times Square with nobody in it. And it was like there were stories about it when that movie came out, and now that's like every day. It's like the nightmare opening of Vanilla Sky. It's just so weird.
So have you found this to be a creative time at all? Like, how are you? I know you've got projects in the works and stuff like that, but is this been a creative time for you? Has it been kind of survival mode? Like what's quarantine been like for you personally?
Yeah, it's been, kind of like little column A, little column B. I've had these like deadlines and these writing projects that I've had to work on, that I've known about for months. I've had deadlines that predated quarantine, and the places where I'm writing for, they're still wanting their stuff. And so it's been a time when I've sort of been forced to create, whether I want to or not. And it's been really hard. It's been really difficult to not even to motivate, but just to kind of like find the mental calm that I need in order to just like make up some words the characters are saying. But having said that, I have done it. I've done a bunch of it just because I had to. And it's been good. As hard as it has been to like really get myself in a headspace where I can be thinking about these fictional characters, it's been nice to like have stuff to work on that's not just 100% self-motivated,
Do you find do you find yourself, or do you feel like quarantine is slipping into these works in ways that you don't realize, like these works that have nothing to do with this and have nothing to do with that? But do you feel, I feel like there's a chance that like in a year or two we're going to see all these shows and all these writings that have like these unintentional quarantine themes on it, just because we're all writing during this time?
Yeah, I think so too. And it's the kind of thing where like I am like I will say I am not intentionally writing work that feels influenced by quarantine, but of course I am. It's like it's one of those things where in 2 years or 3 years or whatever, if I'm lucky enough to have the stuff that I've been writing during this time reach a stage, I'll be able to look back on it and be like, oh, look, that's kind of quarantine-y right there. That stuff in the show. But I mean, what's been funny is that something that I have been able to do during the quarantine is I have been able to like take in art in a way that I haven't before. I've my last couple years has been busy in the most extraordinary and sort of backbreaking way, where I've just been like I truly have been like scheduled like minute to minute for just 2 years straight, and I'm a very busy guy, and so one of my favorite things to do, that I used to be able to do quite a bit, was like go to the movies, and I used to just watch like so much film. So like a huge movie fan in addition to being a huge theater fan, and I just haven't been able to like watch as much stuff in the past few years as I would have liked. And like the quarantine has allowed me to like actually watch some things that have like been on my list for a while, and it's actually like allowed me to watch some movies without like doing a million other things, and I think because of that I've been inspired by art a little more than I have been in the past previous years. So it's like stuff like that that's like, oh yeah, the quarantine is like really changing me. And it's not just movies, it's like albums, where it's like, oh, the quarantine is like changing me because I like listen to like Kid A by Radiohead far more times in a row than I ever would have normally, and then that influenced like the way I wrote this lyric. So it's stuff like that that the quarantine is influencing.
Is anything in terms of film or art or albums or anything like that, anything kind of jump out at you that you've really enjoyed or kind of gained a new appreciation for?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I so like I've been like I said, my number one thing has really been like watching movies that I've wanted to see forever that I just never had before. And so um like I made a list of movies that I watched for the first time that I loved. There's a much larger list of movies that I watched for the first time that I thought were either like good or bad. But the ones that I really loved were this documentary called Scream Queen, which is this documentary that's about Mark Patton, who's the actor who played the lead role in the Nightmare on Elm Street sequel, Freddy's Revenge. It's like a really fascinating documentary. So that one was awesome. I saw Point Break for the first time.
Really?
Yeah, which like Point Break is amazing. Have you seen Point Break?
I mean, I haven't seen it in years, but I saw it way back in the day, and yeah, it was fantastic.
Point Break is like, and it's embarrassing. So Point Break is the Catherine Bigelow movie that stars Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze. But Keanu Reeves is obviously like in Be More Chill, and so I've like thought about Keanu Reeves probably more than like any man who is not Keanu Reeves has thought about Keanu Reeves in the last 5 years. And this is such a sort of like tentpole film of his, but I just had never seen it, and it like blew me away. It's insane. The movie's truly insane, and it's like
Right.
I haven't been able to like talk to all that many people about it recently, but I'm just so excited. I'm excited for America to open so I could like be in a bar and turn to the person next to me and just be like, you have to see Point Break, it's fabulous. And they will invariably be like, yes, the movie came out 30 years ago, sir.
Would the Squip have been different if you knew about Keanu, how Keanu played in Point Break?
Maybe, I don't even know. There might have been a reference, but no, it's so weird. So there's like a surf rock thing that happens with some of the Squip music and Be More Chill. There's like the surf rock guitar, and multiple people have said, have likened it to being a Point Break reference, because Point Break is about like surfers who rob banks. And I've always just kind of been like, yeah, it totally is, without knowing what that even meant. So I guess there's a little Point Break and Be More Chill without me even knowing about it. So yeah, that was a good discovery.
You said a few minutes ago that you're able to get yourself in a headspace to write for these characters despite everything that's going on. Aside from probably the obvious deadline looming that you have to hit, what are some of the ways that you're able to do that? Some tricks, techniques that you're able to kind of put what's going on in the world, even maybe before quarantine and the pandemic, and just kind
Hmm.
of focus and get in the head of the characters and write what you have to write.
For me, it's a lot about it's a lot about clearing my head. That's the number one thing for me. I'm someone who, like, just because I'm so used to multitasking and working on 10 million projects at the same time. And then a lot of times, not really just writing. Like, a lot of times, writing is like the last thing I'm doing. I'm like, sending emails and like trying to get things off the ground and correspondence. And it's a lot of like businessy type work. That the hardest thing for me is just like flatten all of that out, and get to a place where I can be calm and focused and ready to like think of the characters. So a biggie for me is music. It's music and sound is really helpful to me, to sort of have on, in a way. It's like I always need to like have some kind of action happening in order for me to concentrate. I do really poorly when it's like dead silence
Mm-hmm.
and there's not stuff happening around, but even in like non-quarantine times, that's the way I am. Like I'm used to, um I'm used to like writing in, coffee shops and bars, and I like to write in public because I like that sort of like the, hubbub in the background or the periphery, which has been impossible to have in quarantine. And so I've
Right.
had to kind of like, approximate that by yeah, listening to music and just like thinking a lot about the thing I'm writing and sort of vibing on it before I actually put pen to paper.
Yeah. So I kind of want to get into the process of writing a musical because that's to someone like me who likes musicals but cannot fathom, writing an entire show. And like, I read the book Be More Chill, and I'm just fascinated by the fact that you can take this book by Ned Vizzini and then you turn it into the show that you wrote the music and lyrics for. I've talked about this with other people on the podcast, but what's the relationship like between the book writer and the music and lyrics writer for a show?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's different. It's different on every show, and I'm in a weird position in that I've sort of done all different iterations of that collaboration in musical theater. I've had shows where I've just written music and lyrics, and someone else read the book, like Be More Chill. I've had shows where I've written all three by myself. I've had shows where I've collaborated on the book and not written music. So it's been sort of all over the place. And for the thing that I have learned about myself is that even if I'm not the book writer of record, I'm going to be involved in the book, whether anyone wants me to or not. I don't know how to write. I don't know how to write musical theater in a vacuum. Like, I don't know how to do the thing where like someone writes a book scene and there's a hole and you're supposed to write this song that goes in that hole and hand
Right.
it to them and they do whatever. I just can't do it. It's like that's not the sort of stuff that I write, because the sort of stuff that I write is so like conversational and so character driven. I just need to like have a hand in the creation of the characters. I need to fully understand why the characters are doing what they're doing in order to get a song going.
Right.
And so in the case of something like Be More Chill, myself and the book writer Joe Trace, the amazing Joe Trace, we started that collaboration by, we both really loved the book by Ned Vizzini, and we were like, okay, what are the things that we love about this book? What are the things that we think need to change for the stage? Because you can only do so much on a stage, and what are our favorite parts of this book that we would really be bummed if we're not in the stage version? And that's how we started. And literally, Joe Trace, because Joe Trace has done a lot of like TV writing and stuff like that. He was like, let's write on index cards our like three favorite scenes or moments from the book, and we'll just promise each other that we will try to have those moments in the show. And so that's like the first kernel of how we started Be More Chill. And it's been like a process that I've sort of held all other processes too, because it was like, oh, we're starting this thing from this place of like collaboration, from positivity, from like fanboy
Hmm.
ness about our subject material, which like you simply need to have. Like, you need to be like in love with your subject matter in order to write a musical, because they take so long. You're spending so much of your life on these musicals, even the ones that people are like, oh, that one was so fast. It's like years and years and years. So you have to love what you're writing about. And so that's how we started Be More Chill.
So what was it about the book that connected with you that first time?
What I loved about the book was I loved it was the characters, but specifically it was the fact that the characters were these sort of like archetypal characters that you normally see in a teen comedy, like you know the nerd and the stoner best friend and the hot girl, but I loved that they were really complex, and the more you got into it, it was like, oh wait a minute, that character is not behaving the way they're supposed to behave in a story like this. And so I loved that it was actually taking these, you know, these archetypes, these characters that we've seen a million times, and kind of turning them on their head and allowing them to be messy in a way that those characters are never allowed to be. Like in, you know, in so many teen comedies, whatever, what have you, the characters are fairly one dimensional, you know, maybe except for the lead or something, and everyone sort of exists as like they're a stand-in for some idea. But with Be More Chill, it never felt like that. So I loved that. And I loved the sci-fi element. You know, I loved that it was this story, again, that just felt like, you know, any number of teen comedies, which I love. It felt like a John Hughes movie or something. And then all of a sudden, there was this other element that sort of crashed in and overtook the story. And it was just immediately appealing to me. And when I read it the first time, you know, it was like 2000, I think I read it in 2012 for the first time. And it was, you know, before like Stranger Things. It was before like this sort of, you know, 80s, you know, teen synthy renaissance that we've been experiencing for the past few years. And I immediately was like, oh, that's what I want to tap into. I want it to be like a John Hughes movie directed by John Carpenter. That was my you know, pitch sentence for the show for its first year of existence.
What were the 3 scenes that you wrote down on the index card?
I knew you were going to say that, and I don't know. I don't remember. And the second I said it, I was like, why did you say this, Joe? I'm going to ask you. I don't remember.
Okay. So what was the process like what's your songwriting process like? Do you, whether it's for music, it may be different for a show versus just a song that you're writing, but do you start, like, how do you start? Do you start with like music first, writing music first and then lyrics in? Do you have like a lyrical idea that you'll build a song around? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I never do music first.
Okay.
It always starts with the lyric, or it starts with an idea, you know, and maybe it's like, maybe I'll have like an idea for a hook or something, and that hook will have music implied. But it always starts with, the character, you know. It's always like, you know, something like I Love Play Rehearsal, the you know, the song for Christine. It was like, oh, I want to write a song for Christine that sort of sums up who she is, without it being a song where she's like, my name is Christine and this is what I'm all about. You know, it's like, and it's so just, so it comes from that. And so then like knowing, okay, this character Christine, I know that she's going to exist in this world that's really like synthy and really, you know, heavy and agitated, and all the other characters in the show are like really, like they're all like sort of like wound up, and there's like supercharged, and it feels like they're like zipping through this like technology infused world, with this sort of like aggression and anxiety. And I wanted Christine to be like sort of freewheeling and feel a little like easier, and have like a song where it felt like the music was sort of like going wherever she went and followed her. And so that, you know, her as a character, as a human being, informed the, you know, the style of the music, and informed the actual melodies, and informed the lyrics, you know. And so yeah, it all comes back to the character for me.
And by the way, in terms of archetypes, high school archetypes, I just think Christine Canigula is like the perfect high school girl name for a book. Like the main character's got to, like, I don't know what it is, but it's just, it sounds like like that name belongs to a high school girl that you're in love with, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm yeah, I'm so obsessed with, I'm so obsessed with names, you know. And like obviously what's so weird is that in the book, in the novel Be More Chill, Christine's last name is Caniglia, and I changed it to Canigula. And I, once again, I do not remember why I changed it, other than when I first did, I was like, oh, Canigula is feels more correct to me. And I truly, for the life of me, cannot remember a more of a reason the why I changed that name. But I'm so obsessed with like names like that feel, they're both, you know, they both feel like made up and like so real, like names that feel like both elegant and awkward at the same time. I can't get enough of them.
So what was I'm curious what it was like for you last summer. So Be More Chill was wrapping up on Broadway, great run on
Hmm.
there and super popular, like just really caught a wave. The Be More Chill fandom is intense and really fun. Um, I bet it is for you too. But I'm wondering, that show's happening and people like me are responding to it, but that's something you wrote like 4, 5, 6 years ago, and you've written a bunch of other stuff, and you've got other stuff that you're working on concurrently with as that show's closing. So what was that like for you to be like working on other stuff but still kind of living in the world that you wrote 6 years ago?
It's it was it was great. It was there was no, just because of the way musical theater is. Musical theater, or at least how I've experienced musical theater, is that because the things take so long to get on a stage, unless you're someone who just writes one show, or unless you're someone who's like, I wrote this show and I'm not going to write another show until show A has its ultimate production, you're just invariably gonna be working on things concurrently, and you're invariably gonna be working on a show, while another show from years ago is on stage. The cool thing about musical theater is that it really is like, it's ever changing, and it's such a collaborative art form that, like, in Be More Chill, even though I had, like, quote unquote written it a few years before it was at the Signature in 2018, I was working constantly on it. Like, I was with Be More Chill every step of the way, as if it was a show I had just written, and ended up doing a lot of changes on it, because that's sort of like the way that it is, again, in musical theater. Or if, like, for me, it's the way that it is for my new musicals. Like, when a famous pop star writes a musical, sometimes they just kind of, like, write it, and it's like, there you go.
Right.
But not every famous pop star. And so I think it's like, it has to do with the person. But for me, it was never like, oh, it's so weird that people are, like, digging this thing that I wrote years ago, because it never stopped changing, and we did it in London, just before the world stopped. And I even made some changes there, some
Really?
post Broadway changes. Yeah.
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 I was going to ask you if you ever think, and this isn't just necessarily a Be More Chill question, but is a work ever done for you?
Um, I used to think that when a show of mine got to Broadway, then I would feel like it's done. The show's cooked. That's what it was. Um, I might feel like that one day with the show that gets to Broadway, but I didn't feel like that with Do More Chill, because I'd made changes, and I'm starting to feel like, you know what, probably not. But that's kind of the way I think it should be, because theater's alive. Like, I don't like when I see. I guess the way that I think about theater is, like, I don't think of different productions of the show as, like, recreations of the original production. Like, something that was really important with Be More Chill with me, with in London, was that it didn't feel like a recreation of the Broadway. I wanted to feel like its own beast, which meant that I wanted to wrap the show around the actors who did it, and really, open myself up to, like, not just having something in there because, well, that's the way we've done it for, a month or a year or whatever. And so I think that I'll probably always kind of feel about my shows that, like, that one's still, it's always possible to change it up. But of course, with that, you run into, like, the problem of, like, what happens if you just never stop working on it? At what point you're like, all right, I'll probably leave it alone now.
So you've got a couple shows that you've been working on that are in production, the Hunter S. Thompson musical, the
Hmm.
Punk Rock Girl. Are they just on hold right now because of regional theaters as closed as Broadway, or where's everything stand with kind of your newer stuff?
No, I mean, hilariously, both of those shows are shows that I've been working. Those have been the two shows they've been working on during this quarantine.
Okay.
Because the way, like, where they were in their lives, like, they weren't. Neither of those shows were supposed to be on a stage right now, anyway. And so it's, the development continues. Punk Rock Girl is still, it was supposed to be in the fall at this theater on Long Island, and it might still happen. It might get pushed back. Who knows? But we're just sort of moving ahead as if nothing has changed. And hopefully, the Hunter S. Thompson show will be out in La Jolla, next a year from now, and we're just gonna keeping, plowing ahead on the shows, and hopefully they'll find their way to a stage at some point.
I'm fascinated to see a musical treatment of Hunter S. Thompson's life. That's just got to be so much fun.
Me too. It is. It's really wild, And the thing about it is, like, how do you make a musical? How do you make a musical out of that guy's life, while, like, honoring his legacy and his style, and doing something that feels like it's authentic to him, but also have it function as a musical that is not just for the, like, very, small percentage of people who would think a Hunter S. Thompson musical is funny. Like, I just had a call about it a few minutes ago, like right before we were doing this podcast, and I was just talking about like, okay, so like probably at least half of the audience will have no idea who the hell Hunter S. Thompson is. So it's so
Right.
hard to like start it from a place of like, like this guy is great and we're going to show you why he was great, because you have to think like most people in the audience are gonna be like, what, who is this guy? Like, I don't,
Right.
let alone like, why was he great? Like, who is he again? So it's this very bizarre kind of thing where you're doing this like bio musical of a person who some people know really well and like a lot of people don't know at all. So it's been really, really, really cool and challenging.
Right. So what advice would you have? Because I know you write, you perform, you do kind of have your hand in a lot of different pots in theater. So what advice do you have for young people who are interested in theater, whether they like to write, whether they like to perform, do both? What's some of the advice that you have for someone who maybe wants to do both or is trying to figure out what path that is the best one to take?
Yeah, I think that, my number one advice is always just see as much as you can. And I think that
Hmm.
goes for if you're a performer or a writer. Like, I think that knowing what's out there and knowing what has been there is the only thing that will give you the foundation to know where you want to take it. Whether you want to like sort of honor what's there, or just ignore it completely, or burn it to the to ashes. So that's a big thing, which feels like a no-brainer, but I'm just so surprised when I speak to young people or burgeoning writers or actors or whatever, and they don't seem to have a knowledge of musical theater. Which is not to say that you need it in like a historian pushing your like reading glasses up your nose kind of way, but I think it's just, as an artist, like you should just know the art that's out there and let it influence you. But as far as someone who's like, oh, should I do this or that, I think the answer is like, you can do both. Like, do not limit yourself, and anyone who tells you that you need to like choose is wrong. They're just like 100% wrong. And I'm someone who, I always thought I was just going to be a writer. I always thought I was just going to write music, and then I started writing lyrics out of necessity, and then the lyrics became just as important as the music. And then I never thought in a million years I would ever perform my own stuff. I started performing out of necessity because I was like, oh, I have these songs, and the only way that someone's going to hear it is like if I sing the song, and so I should learn how to do that or get over my fear of doing that. And then and now I'm like a performer and very comfortable and confident in doing that. And so it's one of those things that like, if I ever would have asked permission from someone, or if I ever would have asked like advice, like, hey, do you think I should perform? They would have been like, no. In school, they would have told me like, no, of course not. What are you, crazy? But now it's such a huge part of my life and informs my writing. It all informs each other. And I just find that like the people who I work with, the people who I gravitate toward, the one thing that tends to be the same about all of them is, or one thing they tend to have in common is that they're all multi-hyphenates. I work with a lot of people who are actor, writer, producers, or like the choreographer, designer, like people who do all different things. And I just think it's like and again, it all comes down to like just loving the art form. It all comes down to like, it's like the professional equivalent of geeking out, where it's like, oh yeah, I want to do this, and I want to do this, and I want to do this, and it's like a nice way to exist, I think.
So I have my incredibly specific Be More Chill question. I have just
Oh
one
my
that I've
gosh.
been sitting on, but
Oh no.
no, you'll be fine. You got this. You wrote it. Of course you got it. So in Upgrade, at the end of the song, when the company starts
Hmm.
singing, I'm tired of being the person that everyone thinks that I am, over and over, almost like a
Hmm.
round. Is that inspired by Rent?
It's not directly,
Okay.
or not consciously, uh but it definitely has allusions to Will I from Rent.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a huge Jonathan Larson fan, and I love Rent a lot. And so I think that's like a great example of like of a show or like a piece of music that just kind of like got in my psyche, and sort of like it filtered through me and ended up influencing something without me really thinking about it. Because that line was like originally written not to do that. It was written in like a much sort of smaller, more manageable way, and then it kind of like organically blossomed into that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What's the best thing you've read lately?
Um. Oh my goodness. Uh. The the new John Waters book, Mr.
Okay.
Know-It-All.
What's good about it? What do you like so much about it?
I'm
Aside
just
from
a
the fact
huge
that it's John Waters and he's great.
Yeah, Strong Waters. No, I'm just thinking, ceaselessly inspired by John Waters and his his whole career. But I love, again, like talking about like a multi hyphenate. I love that he, was able to like build this body of work as a filmmaker, but also, exist as a personality and as a writer, and I just think he's so witty, and yeah, just I love that it's like unfiltered him. I find his unfiltered voice very, very inspiring. So yeah, love that.
Book I'm reading right now, which I think you might like if you haven't read it, The Colossus of New York by Colson Whitehead. He's a fiction writer. He's great, and it's a bunch of essays about living in New York and just kind of about his own personal New York. And just, I've never lived in New York. We live upstate, but it just kind of captures every time I've been down there in a way that is just, it's really cool, beautifully written, and just really powerful.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm gonna write it down. Writing your rec down.
All right, Joe, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. And we hope to see your stuff. We hope to see anything on a stage soon, but definitely hope to see your stuff soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And yeah, me too. I think, we'll get there. It's a scary time, but theater shall prevail. It simply must.
Thanks for listening to The Other 51. Show notes for this and all of our episodes can be found at sportsmediaguide.com by clicking on the Other 51 tab. If you like the show, please consider giving it a rating and a review, either at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help people find the show. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.